Hello, Internet. So, a year ago, and about 9 months before this channel existed, I would have looked back and said that 2017 was a pretty rough year for the car industry as we lost some arguably pretty good vehicles like the Dodge Viper, the Chevrolet SS sedan, the Aston Martin DB9, the Genesis Coupe. And unfortunately, 2018 gave us no light at the end of the tunnel either, as both Ford and GM have announced major changes to their lineups, and other brands like Toyota have been hinting that they too are eyeing cars for the chopping block. Oh, and Happy New Year, everyone. So, before we get going, let me just let you know that this is a list of every car that I'm aware of that has been discontinued in North America during 2018. However, some of these vehicles will continue internationally, some are slated for one more production year, and some will live on here but will be rebranded, so I'll attempt to cover each one as we go. So, let's get started with the Alfa Romeo 4C Coupe, as due to less than stellar international sales, the 4C Coupe is being discontinued. However, it's not all bad, as the convertible version of the car will live on for now. And next is the BMW 3 Series wagon. As BMW is debuting an all-new and somewhat polarizing 3 Series, they apparently decided to just skip the whole wagon variant thing, as that's the least popular version of the 3 Series, and now hope that you'll just decide to buy an X3 instead. And next up is a car that I covered on my very first weekly news episode on this channel, and that is the Buick Cascada. Due to a lack of popularity, a dying platform that the vehicle shares with other international models, and the fact that cars like the MX-5 exist, the Cascada is on its way out. Though, to this car's credit, it is virtually impossible to find a cheap convertible with a back seat nowadays. Anyway, the next car on the list is also a Buick, and that is the Buick LaCrosse, which mere weeks after the 2020 redesign of the vehicle leaked in China, the cancellation of the LaCrosse was announced in November as part of GM's Great Vehicle Massacre. However, the car will continue in China, so if you really want a refreshed 2020 LaCrosse, don't worry, as you'll just have to wait until 2045 to legally import one. And next is the Cadillac ATS sedan, originally intended to be replaced in the near future by an upcoming AT4, or is it CT5? Either way, Cadillac's car segment's now being called into question altogether, as the sedan version of the ATS ended its production in the 2018 year model. Which brings us to the ATS Coupe, which has been graced with an extra year of life over its sedan counterpart. And with the future of modern American luxury coupes looking pretty uncertain, if you've been thinking about picking up a new one, you've got until the end of 2019 to do so. And next on the list is the Cadillac CT6. Despite having produced a legitimate top-tier luxury car with some pretty high-end tech and its very own engine, and being worthy of competing with international rivals like Mercedes and BMW, GM canceled the CT6 after only 2 years in the North American market, and only months after introducing the CT6V as a 2019 model, the last of which will roll off the assembly lines in June of 2019. But don't worry, as part of GM's Great Leap Forward, the model will continue in China, along with the new redesigned Buick LaCrosse. And the final Cadillac to make the list is the XTS. And as the entire full-size car segment seems to have one foot in the grave, this one really isn't that surprising, as the XTS is also, at its heart, the kind of big, slow, front-wheel drive car that Cadillac's been trying to pull away from. It is worth noting, however, that this is the only car that was actually up in sales at the time they canceled it, as it received a refresh in 2018 along with a 410 horsepower V-Sport variant. And we move into Chevys now, and we'll kick it off with the Chevrolet City Express, not to be confused with the now ancient Chevrolet Express work van, whose future looks fine. The Chevrolet City Express was essentially a rebadged Nissan fleet car that few people wanted and will be discontinued after 2018. Next up is the Chevy Cruze, as Chevrolet's small internationally branded sedan initially opened up to positive reviews and decent sales. Unfortunately, the trend didn't continue, and the car was down in sales by 26% over 2017. And next up, we'll move up the list to the Chevrolet Impala. And despite being one of the most acclaimed vehicles in the segment and being the winner of several awards, the Impala is on its way out, along with pretty much every other full-size American sedan, excluding the Dodge Charger and the Lincoln Continental, whose days are probably also numbered. And then we move on to the last Chevrolet to make the list, and that is the Chevy Volt. As hybrid sales have fallen off dramatically and General Motors is shifting its production towards SUVs and crossovers, the second-gen Chevy Volt is also going the way of the dinosaur. And Chevrolet's green efforts will now continue on in the all-electric Bolt hatchback. Next up is the only Ferrari to make the list, and that is the California T. After almost 10 years on sale, Ferrari announced that it will be canceling its very first front-engine rear-wheel drive car, and the California will be replaced by the more stylish entry-level Ferrari, the Portofino, which is already in sale in most markets. And now on to the Fords, and we'll kick it off with the Ford Fiesta. And as you know, Ford's canceling all of its cars with the exception of the Mustang. And unfortunately for the Ford Fiesta, it is not a Mustang. So, production of the current Fiesta ends in May of 2019. And there's a new version of the car that will live on, however, it's just that it won't be sold here in the States. Next on the list is the Ford C-Max Hybrid and Ford Energy. After 5 years in production and the car being somewhat of a debacle for Ford as there were some legal issues with the brand overstating the car's fuel efficiency, and some confusing branding as most people still don't even know what it is, and it never got close to competing with the top dog in the segment, and that is the Toyota Prius. And the next Ford to make the list is the Ford Focus. And Ford ended production of the current Focus early in 2018. But similar to the Ford Fiesta, the nameplate will live on internationally as an all-new vehicle that will take place at the current one. It's just that we won't get it here. And moving up in size, we're on to the Ford Fusion. And what was once a popular and successful car, especially after the 2013 redesign, production of the midsize sedan will end in May of this year, as lately the aging car has struggled to keep buyers interested, and as such, the Fusion is another casualty of Ford abandoning the car market, which leads us to its big brother, the Ford Taurus. As years ago, the Taurus was the best-selling car in the US for 4 straight years. But the new Taurus hasn't been so lucky, and due to the less than stellar sales of the full-size sedan, the last ones will roll off the assembly lines in spring of 2019. Which brings us to the only Honda to make the list, and that is the Honda CR-Z. While, like most people out there, I didn't rush out to buy one of these, as I'm not necessarily a fan of small front-wheel drive hybrids, I do feel like this is one of the more interesting cars on the list, as it has a pretty cool hybrid boost system, and it's the only hybrid econo car sold in North America with an available manual transmission. However, it came onto the scene a little late, just as hybrid sales were beginning to fall off and production of the car ended early in 2018. And the only Hyundai to make the list is the Hyundai Azera, which this one was fairly predictable due to the relatively poor sales and not a lot of recognition behind the Azera nameplate. Plus, Hyundai now has the Genesis brand to focus its luxury aspirations on. And so far, things have been going relatively well over there, it seems. On to the Lincolns, as we'll talk about the Lincoln MKT, which launched in 2009 and has enjoyed most of its success in fleet sales. The MKT is on the way out as of 2019. However, Lincoln will restyle and rename the MKT next year, as it'll return as the slightly more highbrow Lincoln Aviator. And the next one on the list is the Lincoln MKX, and much like the previously mentioned MKT, the MKX will get a similar treatment, as it appears that it's moving back to naming its cars over giving them designations, and the MKT will return as the Lincoln Nautilus. Next up is the only Mercedes to make the list, and that is the AMG GTS. Beginning in 2019, the AMG GTS will be discontinued, and AMG's lineup will now include only 2 offerings in the way of the refreshed AMG GT and the AMG GTC. And next up is the only Nissan on the list, and that is the Nissan Juke. After 8 polarizing years on the market, Nissan canceled the car earlier in 2018 and is replacing it with the somewhat less controversial Nissan Kick. Up next is the Subaru Forester XT, and apparently not only are cars unpopular, but so is extra horsepower, as Subaru's popular crossover is ditching the turbocharged XT variant as it rolls out the redesigned Forester for 2019. And for context on this, in 2017, the XT accounted for less than 10% of Forester sales, so... Alright, on to the Toyotas. First up is the Corolla IM, and after a short life at Toyota as a rebranded Scion, the Corolla IM is canceled as of this year. But not to worry, as Toyota will sell you what is essentially the exact same car in the way of the Corolla hatchback. And next up, we're going to talk about the Yaris IA, and much like the Corolla IM I just mentioned, this former Scion is going away in name only, as it will get a refresh and be rebranded as the upcoming Yaris sedan. And the final Toyota to make the list is the Prius V. Officially, the V version of the Prius is canceled. However, the Prius brand continues to make money for Toyota, and there are already rumors out there that the Prius V may make a comeback sometime in 2020. And next up is the Volkswagen Beetle. As I reported to you guys a few weeks ago, the Volkswagen Beetle is on its way out after the 2018 year model, due mostly to a lack of sales and the fact that the car has remained more or less the same for the last 7 years. There are rumors, however, that we may once again see the VW Beetle for sale at dealerships sometime in the future, but if it does, there's no doubt that it'll do so as an electric vehicle. And the last car to make the list is the VW Touareg, as 2019 will be the last year for the VW's midsize crossover, And like many other vehicles on this list, it will live on in the rest of the world. It'll just no longer be sold here in North America due to poor sales. No doubt mostly due to the almost $50,000 starting price. And that's going to wrap it up. So, for those of you who weren't counting, that's a grand total of 31 vehicles in North America that didn't survive 2018, which is a pretty sizable number. So, now that we've covered 2018, let's briefly talk about 2019. As it seems vehicles like the Chevy Sonic, the Dodge Charger, both the Lexus LC and RC, the Lincoln Continental, and several others may be in the crosshairs as well. So, if you want to stay informed, keep it tuned in here, and I'll keep you up to date. Also, on the opposite end of that, if anyone's interested in hearing about what upcoming 2019 and 2020 vehicles I'm most excited about, I've got another video coming out on that very topic soon. But until then, thank you everyone for watching. Happy New Year, and I hope you have a great 2019. I'm out.